Welcome to Real Rockford Files, for tales of the paranormal, supernatural, and the flat-out unbelievable. Today I'm going to be sharing ghost stories from Washington. Let's get into it. Story 1. In early 1990, I went to Orcas Island in Washington's San Juan Islands to stay with family and friends at an older estate, nestled on 80 beautiful wooded acres. It was a hot August afternoon, and everyone but myself left to go play tennis. After lounging around a while outside, I got hot and decided to cool off inside. The house was very lovely, so I gave myself a self-guided tour. I ended up in what looked like attic space, saw a lovely wood-framed mirror, of which I peered inside. Suddenly, I could hear voices all around me, wildly talking in an attempt to be heard. Surprised and a bit shocked, I ran downstairs and fled outside. I was not going back in that house alone. When the owner's son returned with my family, I asked who might be haunting the house. I was told that there was a ghost in the house, and it was a woman who had killed herself several decades earlier. She had stuffed her car's tailpipe with a rag and ran the engine in the garage until she died. She left this world but didn't leave the manor. Story 2. When I was about 12 years old, I went to visit my dad, who lived in Washington at the time. We went to visit the fort. Forgive me for forgetting the name. When we went into the fort, my dad, my stepmom, and grandparents and I all went into one of the fort's rooms, and after all my family left the room, I heard a noise, like rocks moving on the ground. I got scared and ran to tell my family. The next room that we went into had this big metal door with one of those big round knockers on it. After my family left the room, I heard the knocker slam on the big door. Again, I ran out of the room and caught up with the rest of my family. The ghost must have wanted to make sure I knew they were there. Later on, we went to the top of the fort. My dad and grandpa wanted to go into the fort when we saw these stairways going down. I told them I did not want to go down there because I didn't feel like it. So they went on without me. I waited about 5 minutes and called to my father to make sure he was still there. A second later, I heard my father's and grandfather's voice reply to me, saying, "Come on down, Mindy, come on." So I went down the stairs into the room. When I got in there, there was nobody there. I went out of the room and saw my father and grandfather on the other side of the fort. I went to them and asked them if they told me to come down, and they never told me to come down the stairs, and that they had been walking around the fort. That is when I knew that there was really our ghosts in that fort. Story 3. One day I was with my friends. We decided to go to our best friend's old house because she moved out. It was a very small house, 2 floors, an attic, and a living room connected to a bathroom and kitchen. The house had been known to be haunted because a lady died upstairs in the attic in her wheelchair. The house was empty and all the lights were on and everything. We walked through the door and we were very frightened on what we thought was going to happen. I didn't even believe in ghosts until after this. I was very young during this. We walked through the living room and then turned to go up into the attic, where my friend's room was, where the old lady had died. A girl was in front of me and one in the back of me too. I was in the middle. As I put my foot on the first step, I heard a very strange voice. Not knowing if I actually heard it, I turned around. My friend looked back as well. She heard it too. We went up the stairs. There was a little box in the middle of the room. I told my friend to go get it. I tried to scare her, so I yelled out really loudly. Then we all started going for the stairs and running, because the lights were flashing on and off everywhere. There weren't any lights upstairs though. As we ran down the stairs, we all fell down at the same time, right on our butts at the exact same moment. Screaming, we ran out of the house. The door was closed, but we left it open. We never went back, ever. Story 4. We moved into our 80-plus-year-old house a little over 5 years ago. Our youngest son was 2. He refused to go in the bathroom alone. He said he saw black eyes in there. We brushed it aside, thinking that he didn't want to be potty trained or he had a very active imagination. Not too long after we moved in, things would disappear from where we had just sat them down. Hairbrushes, keys, cups of coffee, etc., and reappear in another area. We often felt like we were being watched. I would feel taps on my shoulder as I worked on my computer. My children would come to me and say, "What?" because they thought I called them, but I had not. One of my sons and I were in the kitchen talking as I did dishes. From across the room, a box of cereal flew from the top of the refrigerator, hit the window over the sink, and fell into the sink. We just stared at each other without saying a word. I began to see large, dark figures going from the bathroom into the hallway and through the wall and back again. My husband doesn't believe in spirits. Well, he didn't, but he saw it too. The kids began telling us that they saw a large black thing walking around the house. We had not told them what we had seen. One night, a friend of mine came over and we were watching a ghost cam online. The lights were out in the computer room. All of our kids were over our shoulders looking at the cam with us. The lights turned on. Thinking it was one of my kids, I said, "Hey, turn them back off." The lights went off. My friend said that she kind of liked them on, actually. Instantly, the lights came back on. One of the kids said, "Whoa, who did that?" We turned around to see all the kids standing right there with us, nowhere near the light switch. I said, "Well, I want the lights off," and they turned off again. One night, I was in my bed watching TV. My husband was at work. My two youngest boys were asleep on the sofas in the living room. My daughter was at a sleepover, and two of my older sons were watching TV in the living room. My son came in to ask me if I had heard anything. I laughed and said no. I asked him if he was watching a scary movie and got spooked. He said no, they were watching Family Guy. Nothing spooky about that. I told him he was being paranoid. He came back in a few minutes later and asked me to come into the living room. Ticked as I was, I went in and started working on a sewing project just so I can keep busy while waiting on them to feel more comfortable or fall asleep. Both boys looked frightened as they said, "Mom, did you hear that?" I had the sewing machine going, so I hadn't heard anything. I sat and waited about 5 minutes. Nothing happened. I started sewing again, and they stopped me again. I was really ticked off by then. Frustrated, I began putting up my sewing project. I was stopped by a very loud thud from the second floor above me. The boys kept asking me if I'd heard that. I blamed it on the cats. My son pointed to the two sleeping cats on the floor. Before I could come up with another logical explanation, it happened again, and again, and again. For about an hour we heard continuous sounds of banging, thuds, and sounds of furniture moving around on the wood floors upstairs. We attempted to go up the stairway to see what was going on, but we were honestly too afraid to go up the first step even. Finally, the sound stopped. The boys fell asleep, but I stayed awake until my husband came home at about 6 a.m. He asked me why I was up so early. I told him that I hadn't been asleep. I was hesitant to tell him what had happened since he really did not believe in hauntings or spirits, despite having seen the dark figure before. He asked me what was wrong. I told him. He laughed and headed upstairs. I was right behind him. He stopped before the last step. I looked around his shoulder and saw that our oldest son's room had been demolished. Box springs were off of their beds, the mattresses were leaning on the walls, the dresser was in the middle of their room with the TV on top of it. Toys, books, papers, and clothing were strewn all over the room. Without speaking, we cleared the room. I talked to a friend about it, and she suggested that we use white sage to cleanse the house. I also did a lot of Googling about hauntings. I took my digital camera upstairs in the dark and took pictures wherever I felt funny or cold. When I came downstairs, I also took a picture of my fireplace because I had always felt funny there. Nothing showed up on the LED screen of my digital camera, but I uploaded the pictures anyways. We saw orbs everywhere. In one area of the upstairs hallway, it looked like a galaxy of sorts. Hundreds of orbs all around. At the bottom of the stairs, there was a red blob. The photo of the fireplace showed a white woman in what appeared to be a bathrobe of sorts, and she was very bright white. Wanting to make sure that I didn't suggest to anyone what it looked like, I just showed friends and family the photo. Everyone said it was a woman. We went and got some white sage and burned it all over the house, outside, inside, everywhere. Things calmed down. I was talking to a neighbor, and she said that the devil worshippers had rented our house before we moved in. She said very odd sounds came from that house, and that after they had been evicted, the neighborhood, her husband, had come over to visit owners while they cleaned and were horrified to see demonic graffiti sprayed on all the walls. I thought that explained it and was glad we had cleansed the house. Within a couple of months, it started back again. My daughter yelled for us one night. We ran up there and her new television was flipping channels. I told her she was sitting on her remote. She pointed to her nightstand. It was on her nightstand. I took the batteries out. The TV continued switching channels. The next day, our older boys yelled for us. We ran up to their room and were astonished to find that every channel was French-speaking. We don't have satellite TV, just cable. We don't live in a French-speaking area or normally have French-speaking television channels. We turned off the TV. Our bathtub began running water while nobody was even in that part of the house, and our toilet would flush on its own. I had a self-cleaning oven. You know when you slide the lever to the lock the oven door to turn it on for the self-cleaning, how it makes a buzzing sound. While we were in the living room watching TV, the buzzing sound began happening over and over. We walked into the kitchen to see the lever going back and forth very quickly, and the digital clock and control was changing from numbers to letters to symbols at a furious rate. We stood there watching this in silence for almost 5 minutes. My kids looked terrified, so I felt I had to take control somehow. I yelled in a very stern voice, "Knock it the F off." Immediately it stopped and the oven door completely fell off onto the floor. I inspected the door. It looked as if the metal semicircular hinges had been cut. I tried to talk to the spirits. I don't know why, but I feel one is the elderly lady who had grown up here and inherited the house. I have no idea who the dark one is. I said that they could stay if that is what they wish to do, but please don't frighten our family anymore. I said that they would be happier if they went to the other side. Thinking I felt a little foolish for talking to them, I stopped. I began feeling very depressed and sad. I felt like crying. At that point, I began a 3-month battle with deep depression. I just felt so hopeless and there was no real reason. My life is great, my family is great. There was just no real reason for my sadness. When we would leave, I felt much better. If we went away for a weekend, I would be fine until we returned to the house. I love this house, so it wasn't my living situation that was depressing me. I am working through that. I seemed to get better after I acknowledged that maybe I was feeling sadness from the spirits. My kids began seeing the dark thing again. Now it seems like this area of our foyer and living room, kitchen, bath, hallway, and my daughter, who does not believe at all in spirits, said she saw it standing at the foot of her bed. A lot of visitors to our home say they feel kind of freaked out. We don't tell people what goes on here, so they don't have any preconceived ideas of a haunted house here. They just say that they feel frightened, or as if something is watching them. My daughter's friend is spending the weekend with us. She said she felt a very cold spot in the living room. I felt it where she pointed it out. I brought a stool in the area and sat there. My back got cold. My son and the friend touched my back and it was ice cold. My face, hands, arms, and legs were warm. She knew nothing about our issues here. She said that earlier, when she had taken a bath, she got creeped out and felt she was being watched. She hurried and rinsed the soap off and ran out of the bathroom. I asked her if she felt funny anywhere. She kept talking about the fireplace. For the past 4 months, I have woken up with very deep burning scratches on my arm, legs, back, and face. I have scars from some of them. They burn. Usually they're in groups of 3. Almost always, the middle one is the deepest. I do not have fingernails and there is nothing in my bedding that would cause scratches. It's not our cats either. We don't have the cats anymore. We have a dog, but she sleeps in my son's room. Sometimes she stops suddenly and growls at nothing. I don't know if I'm being singled out because I did the sage, so it hates me now, or if it is ticked because I'm not afraid of it. I don't know why I'm the one scratched up. I am leery of trying the sage again because I don't want to piss it off again or provoke it to do more. My mom wants us to move out of there. I don't know if it would follow us or not. For now, we're just going to deal with it. Story 5. I believe my house is haunted. Every night when I'm the only one awake, I hear a faint scream coming from the kitchen/dining room area. Then I hear a thud, and a person chanting the name of a demon I happen to be somewhat familiar with. I have dreams of him almost every night. Chukalane. At least I think that's how you spell it or pronounce it. Also in my garage area, there is something in there that wants me as well. Now my dad is a spiritual person who knows a lot about all these things, and whatever is in the garage is afraid of him, but it wants me, and the exorcism, for lack of a better word, my dad told me to use doesn't work. I use it in the garage, and the garage freaks me out, and the garage starts to freak out. It starts laughing so faintly that it's hard to hear at first. If it helps any, I was using a Ouija board about 1 or 2 days before all this happened. It said I was in danger of death, but since my dad started showing up more often, the spirits have been backing down. If anyone can offer any helpful advice, it's welcome. Story 6. I'm 16 years old and I live in Algona, Washington. I recently moved into an apartment with my dad, my sister, and my brother. My sister and I share a bedroom. One night my sister told me that she knows how to contact the dead. I was a little freaked out, but I wanted to try it. I said that we should contact our great-grandma who died in 2001, so we did. We began asking her questions like, "Are you at peace? Are you disappointed in us? Are you in heaven? Are you happy?" The only positive answer was, "She's not disappointed. She was not at peace, not in heaven, and not happy. She's stuck on earth." We felt like she was there to protect our family. Since I moved in, I have felt a presence, not a good one. I'm always on edge and I always feel like I'm being watched. My sister said she felt like our grandma wanted to break the chain. We were holding hands. She looked very scared, so we did. We felt like there was something evil in our room. We sat with the lights on for about an hour before deciding to go to bed. We turned out the lights and soon felt the presence again, only it felt more evil. We sat with our eyes closed. We did not want to see it, but I did anyway. I had a vision in my head of a tall, dark, menacing figure standing near my bed, staring at us. I asked her to turn on the light, and she said no. She felt like it was a demon. Spirits can't do anything to you, but demons can. We began to say the Lord's Prayer and pray in tongues. The presence went away and turned on the lights. I still feel it, not as prominently as that night, but it's still there. Don't forget to subscribe for more stories. Hope you enjoyed.